Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Frame Found podcast. I am your host, Chris Tinsley. For this week's episode, the theme of the episode is going to be, I guess, call it like longevity. Kind of like what I have on screen right here is just kind of a general sentence that encapsulates what the episode is going to be about. And like all the previous episodes, I got a whole lot of prompting questions to kind of keep the thought like going. For those of you, if this is your first time like joining this podcast, it's kind of the structure of it is a lot. It's very stream of consciousness. It's very me just kind of like wrestling with a topic as it applies to like organizational effectiveness. So to just kind of lay the groundwork for kind of what this podcast is, if you are just joining, is it's ultimately a podcast that just is topics surrounding the overall topic of organizational effectiveness. So whether that's things like task management, project management, like leadership, just general kind of like logistics of what it means to kind of like operate within like life, whether that's through a professional lens or a personal lens. Um, and I think, you know, for those of you who have already like tuned in, thank you for taking the time of just hearing me kind of like recap that for everybody. One thing I do want to call out, I guess a few other things I want to call out is the first one is for those of you who don't know, I have what's called a timing like based speech or I'm sorry, a timing like based like stutter, which is a speech impediment of sorts. What you've been hearing so far within this episode is whenever you hear me say the word mm, like that's what's called a crash word. It's a way for me to, when I realize that there's a word that I'm going to stutter on, that I can then throw that word in to then crash it into the next word so I can kind of keep the flow. And it was really interesting when I was kind of writing the outline of today's episode. Today is January 1st, like New Year's Day. Um, I don't know. It was kind of an interesting um, when writing the outline of this episode. It was just kind of an interesting thing because this episode is going to hit on topics like, I mean, regarding like longevity, but then also like things like motivation and discipline. Um, which when writing this outline, I was thinking, you know, I was really having a hard time even getting the motivation or the discipline to really do today's episode. I mean, I'm recording this at like 5 p.m., which is significantly like later than whenever I do most episodes. And I just feel like it's kind of important to acknowledge that, maybe I'll talk about it in the episode, but I just think like, I guess the reason why I want to acknowledge that is that I think it's really important that in this era of like modern work, that being human, being tired, not having like the umph to do something, right? Like it's something that we all struggle with. And I think that's just part of the journey. And I think, part of the reason why I wanted, to do this episode specifically is, I don't know, maybe it's just like it's the fact that it's like a new year, it's the end of the year. We're walking into these very interesting times of complex work, as a lot of you guys hear me talk about on previous episodes. And I don't know, I just think I kind of just want this week's episode to be a little bit more kind of human centric than other ones. So I think I guess just to come straight, like I am exhausted. I'm very tired, and I feel like as I've just been kind of talking, I've been maybe tangenting more than I do. I think maybe you guys can just see it like on my face. You can hear it in my tone that today's just been kind of a tiring like day, and I just feel like coming like clean about that. And I think maybe just let's kind of just consider the open of this episode, which is everything that I've been talking about for the past few like minutes to be wrapped. So let's do this. Let me just kind of say what the kind of the spine, so to speak, of this episode is, and then we will move on to the first question. So, the spine of this episode: longevity in a complex world comes from skill, not like motivation or insulation from struggle. So that's what this episode is going to be about this week, and I think let's move into the first question. What actually sustains a human when life keeps getting more complex instead of calmer? Okay, so for that first question, just kind of looking at even trying to record this podcast, right? I think doing hard things helps sustain a human life. Uh, that's just like the first thing that comes to mind. Just trying to like muster the energy to even press record and to get in front of the camera for this week's episode. Kind of the other, the impetus of this episode, like so to speak, is me and the family have an annual kind of tradition of watching a certain like set of films during the or I guess like New Year's Eve. Like films um like My Dinner with Andre, like Good Will Hunting, Awakenings, and like Dead, like Poets Society. And I know that three of those four are all like Robin, like Williams films, which is just kind of crazy. But I don't know. That guy was an absolute like genius. Maybe we'll talk more about that in like a later episode. Just kind of the journey of his career, and it's. I think that's also just a fascinating thing from, I don't know, call it like a life perspective, I guess. But let me kind of just bring this back home. So like the reason why I'm bringing up those films is, and the reason why we have this kind of tradition is, from an artistic like lens, like, for those of you who have seen those films, they're very human like centric. They touch on, a lot of themes that are just part of just the general human condition. So I think the best way to put it, and it sounds like a corny, campy thing, but I think just things like art, within that kind of context sustains life. I think it's films like that, it's actors like that, it's stories like that, it's things like that that just kind of touch a different part of the human soul that, um, you know, it, I don't know. I mean, like being like trying to articulate that is like a whole different like topic, and that's an episode for a different day. But my point in all of that is like there's these like themes of, I don't know, trials and tribulations, and the way that people like get through them. The connections that are formed between those people. I don't know. It's all just really important. I guess let me just come back to this question so I can stay on the topic. So what actually sustains a human life when life keeps like getting more complex instead of calmer? I think just having the ability to do hard things, and then also just like general art things. I don't even know how to like encapsulate that. I think just I'll keep it as like a if you know, like kind of thing. Like for anybody who has seen those films and had conversations about them. I don't know. I just think just because it's like a fresh thing that we did like last night and today. I don't know. It's the first thing that comes to mind. And the other reason why I wanted to do this episode too, and we'll talk more about it with the other like prompting questions, is that like these things can show up in different ways, right? They show up within a professional context, within a personal context. And I think again, just kind of tying it back to like what this podcast is even all about in the first place is it's all like a framework of sorts. And yeah, I mean, it's all just a means to just continue. I guess if we want to like look at this from like a logistics perspective, from like an operational like lens, it's all just a means to continue to operate effectively and efficiently throughout like life. And again, that's in personal context and a professional context. So I think just now I'm just rambling about this question. So I think let's just end this question here, and we're going to move on to the next one. All right, question number 2. Why do we chase simplification instead of like building the emotional, cognitive, and physical capacity to handle complexity? All right, so the impetus of this kind of question is, and I've been noticing it just within like a professional context, and maybe even as I'm like thinking and we're talking through this right now, even within a personal context, it's just, I've noticed over the years with both like my career as well as like freelance jobs, just kind of working within the world in general, I guess, even just as a human being, is that things are getting complex and people are continually like gravitating towards wanting to simplify things. And when kind of looking through this question for this episode, like simplification comes up in different ways. And one of the ways, when like reading this question, like one of the first things that came to mind, just again because I work in a like logistics capacity, is everybody wanting to like gravitate towards like processes. And it's interesting, working within complex environments that I guess you could kind of say that like process is kind of being it's almost being it's almost like synonymous. It's almost becoming synonymous with simplicity. And I don't know, maybe I'll have a whole other episode about, when people say process, what do they actually mean? But that's just like the first thing that comes to mind, is that like just everybody's just trying, just like in a world of just increasing complexity, whether it's technical or like a soft skill thing, like a hard skill or a soft skill, right? I think maybe, I don't know, let's read the question back. Why do we chase simplification instead of like building the emotional, cognitive, and physical capacity to handle complexity? Simple things are just easier to manage, like end of story. And I just think maybe that's the wrong thing to be chasing. And instead, and we'll go into this within other questions within the podcast, is that we should be striving towards kind of skill sets, right? I think, and it's definitely another one of the questions here, but I think we just more so need to have like a willing acceptance that things are complex, and in the world that we live in today, it will continue to get more complex. And even as I say that statement, right, you can just look at the history of time, right? Like as time has progressed, complexity has just continually increased. So who's to say, like, that's just the way that it is. Like, and like maybe we've kind of hit like a hockey stick of sorts, you know, where maybe we're handling more complexity, or we're trying to navigate more complexity than like we're used to. But I don't know. I mean, I'm just kind of like looking at myself, and I'm just looking at myself from like 3 or 4 years ago, like just throughout the years, like 1 year ago or 2 years ago, like I'm a different person than I was then, and I know more now because of whatever trials and tribulations like that I've gone through. And I don't mean that to sound like a pompous thing. I just, the reason why I'm saying is that like I hope that you can kind of tell by me saying that like on camera that like I mean that. Um and maybe you can kind of like notice in my voice a little bit of like reluctancy just because the comment just sounds so like, I don't know, grandiose or pompous. I don't know. I don't like saying things like that. But the reason why I'm saying it is that I hope that you can tell that I mean that, and I hope that that means something to you, and that you can look back on on where you were at, you know, from like last year or 2 years ago or 3 years ago, or when you went into some sort of trial of sorts and you came out the other end like stronger, like more skilled, right? Like it is real. Like that stuff actually is real. But you know, and this is definitely a topic for a whole other, like for an entirely like other episode. But I just think like, I think we as human beings just tend to forget that. And I don't know, I just kind of wanted to just say that out loud for anybody like watching this episode. I don't know. I think it's just important for us to remember that, you know, the trials and the tribulations that we go through, they do improve us in as much as we forget them. And, you know, maybe you're tired and you definitely like forget them when you're in it, or you're exhausted, or you just don't have the perspective. And as I'm just talking right now, I'm like, okay, this is a whole other episode for a different day. But let's get back to this question. I need to like re-anchor this thing. Why do we chase simplification instead of like building the emotional, cognitive, and the physical capacity to handle complexity? I think simple is just a much easier thing to manage and to understand and to kind of like roll with, right? When things are simple, like, yeah, great. Like it's just great. It's simple. But I think that's wrong because, oh boy, like a whole other episode like popped in my head. I think maybe let's just touch on this, and then I'll wrap up this question. I think like when the trade-off of simplifying things is that you lose the nuance. And if you lose the nuance of like understanding a problem completely, you won't actually be able to solve the problem. So simplicity has this inherent cost associated with it. And like that's definitely that's like definitely a topic for another episode. But I think it's just really important that we increase our capacity to handle more complexity. And you know, some of these questions will like go into more of like the how of that. But I think I don't know, as I'm sitting here and thinking back to that response, that was definitely long-winded. But yeah, let's just end that question there. All right, question number 3. What do soul feeding films teach us about recovery and presence that work culture keeps ignoring? All right, so I don't know if I really want to answer the recovery part of this, because when I'm reading this question, like the thing that comes to mind, and damn, I feel like I just lost it. What do soul like feeding films teach us about recovery and presence that work culture keeps ignoring? So the first thing that just kind of comes to mind, like with this question, is the comparison between like art and work. I think just if we look at those two things, right? I think I don't know. Okay, just hang with me on this one. I feel like, how do I even articulate this one? And this sounds so cheesy. I don't know. Let's just explore this thought. So just hang with me. Like work, for the most part, it doesn't really contain art, and I think maybe that's kind of a problem. And so, oh, and like, what's the definition of art and what's the definition of work? So let me tell you what's in my head right now. Is that like, okay, so like what's fresh in my head is because we just watched like like Good Will Hunting, is that you're looking at the conversations between like Robin and Matt Damon throughout the whole film. And there's just these intangibles in the conversations and like the tone and the presence that's like, you can just, as a human being, you can just kind of like sense connection, and like you're learning, you're kind of seeing in real time like a microcosm example of like mentorship and like like leadership. There's so many scenes in that movie, and I don't even want to go into it, but like let me just kind of keep it as like a big picture thing. Like I just feel like for the most part that's not existent in a professional context, and I think it's kind of hard. I think that there's a value in it, like being in a professional context. And now that I even say this, is that like maybe that's the whole thing where it's like from a leadership perspective, I think the ones that are really impactful within an organization are the ones that can kind of channel that kind of existence, that kind of like the conversations between like Robin and Matt. And oh, I don't know, that's a whole other episode now, but it's like, I don't know. I just think that like that's something that is like missing from a professional context. But then now when I look at it from the inverse, right? There's a lot of like art out there, or films or stories or books or whatever, right? That are talking about professional contexts, and then they have like an artistic like like spin on them, simply because it is a piece of art that is about a professional context. So I guess what I'm just trying to say is that like I think maybe that's why a lot of us like gravitate towards those things, but we don't see it in the inverse. I think, and I got to get back to this question. So like I know I'm tangenting, but just hang with me on this next tangent, because it's something that's been on my mind for a little bit. But let me just try to like bring this one home really quickly. I feel like this is a very interesting era that we live in with memes. I think it's really interesting to see, all these kind of like professional like memes of working within like a corporate like context, right? And I think the reason why that is coming to mind is like those memes are in and of themselves a work of art. Like it's a piece of art. There's creative associated to it, right? So it's really interesting when you see like the professional context within like an artistic like context. So I don't know. I just think that there's something interesting about that. The reason why I bring that up is I think we got to get it flipped, where we've got to inject more of that art into the professional context, as opposed to the professional context within the art, if that makes sense at all. I feel like I use too many words to kind of explain that, but anyways, thought that was kind of an interesting thing. And I think tying it back to the previous point, I just think like the leaders that we really adore and respect, they have that ability to have that sort of connection, much like the characters that like 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 Robin and Matt play in that film. I guess, oh my god, I'm blanking, and I hope I'm not wrong, but like Robin's character's like name is Sean, and Matt's is Will, obviously. Anyways, okay, now I got to get back to the first point and really bring this one home. Okay, what do soul feeding films teach us about recovery and presence that work culture keeps ignoring? I don't know if I really want to answer the recovery and presence part. I don't know. I think let's just let's just end this question here. Like, let's modify this question a little bit. What do soul like feeding films teach us about work that work culture keeps ignoring? Maybe that question doesn't make sense. I don't know. I'm having a hard one with this, guys. I'm having a hard time with this one. I think let's just bring this one home. Ah, it's an it's an it's an art in and of itself to inject art within work. Yeah, I like that one. Let's end that one there. All right. Question number 4. How you do anything is how you do everything, a quote, reveal itself when you're tired and still responsible? Okay, maybe I'm just tired and that question maybe doesn't make sense. But when writing this episode is I just wanted to talk about that quote, like how you do anything is how you do everything, and tying it back into kind of the spine of this show, like so to speak, is with longevity. Is the reason I like that quote because I do believe in it. Where oh, maybe this is the wrong question. I don't know, guys. I'm going to kind of free form this one a little bit, so kind of just hang with me. So let's just look at the quote. How you do anything is how you do everything, and I think that's it. I think that's a true statement, and I think that when you're trying to get through hard times, whatever hard time you're trying to get through, or whatever trial and tribulation is, that like you need to remember and understand that you've been through those types of things like before, and there were ways that you navigated that you can then apply to whatever the current like situation that you're in. And I don't know, I think that that's just kind of an important thing for people to remember, because I think we all have responsibilities in this world. We're all tasked with having to do things, to get things done, to produce outcomes. And there's going to be days where you're going to feel like this. You're going to feel tired. You're going to feel like not completely present, or like fully like put together. You're going to run out of like the motivation. Your discipline could be like wavering, right? And those all in and of themselves are a form of a trial and tribulation of sorts, right? And so there's ways that you navigate that. So it's like, I don't know, like here's where my mind's going now is, let's just look at this episode. It's 5:30 now ish. I should have filmed this episode a lot sooner. And again, I'm tired. And I think for me, I want to make sure that I post these episodes on a weekly basis, and I'm already technically a little bit late. But that's something that I wanted. That's an outcome that I'm trying to pursue. And, I'm kicking myself in the ass when I wake up in the morning. I'm just like, I'm not into it. Not feeling it. And so, okay, I've felt this way countless times before, whether it be for this podcast or just anything in life. And okay, so what are those things that I do to, to keep it moving? Okay, well, I'll journal, I'll write. Okay, let's go do that. The house is a little bit like out of order. Okay, there's some small little tasks that you've been wanting to get done around the house. Okay, let's do some of those things. Let's try to get a kind of like momentum of sorts. I like playing music. So, I'll grab that thing right there and I'll pluck a few chords, strings, play chords, strum chords, whatever. You know what I'm saying? You know, make some coffee. Like I'll sit out in the backyard. Yeah, I don't know. Now I'm just kind of going through my day, but just hang with me, guys. So as I started doing those things, I started to get the motivation to kind of, okay, all right, let's grab the bag, let's grab the lights, let's grab the tripod, let's frame it up, let's get the outline going, right? It's kind of, let's like think about it, let's get the camera onto the tripod, let's get the mic on, let's hook it up, let's go, press record. Now I just feel like I'm taking you through my day. But my point in all of this is, and let's bring it back to the question, how you do anything is how you do everything, right? That's not really even the question. It's just what the question was trying to hit. But like, let's just stay on that kind of like theme, is that like, I don't know, I guess maybe I just want to take you through my day as it stood right now, because it's just like, yeah, I woke up saying no, like, oh, I just don't want to do the thing. And I don't know, I guess we could tie it back into, another part of the episode, like previous questions. Like I could drag my feet and just be like, oh, why is it that I just don't have like the motivation, or I can't get a good night's rest, and there's always there's all these other things that I have to do, and there's a lot of things happening in a professional context, in a personal context, and it's like, oh my God, why can't I catch a break? And it's like, I don't know, you could like wake up and like feel those things, and it's like, yeah, that's part of being human. And it's like, wait, but this has happened countless times like previously, and I'd like to think that for anybody who's watching this episode, they have felt the same way. And I don't know, maybe you feel the same way as you're watching this episode, and I don't know, I do hope that kind of like inspires something. But my whole point in this kind of how you do anything is how you do everything, is that like, conquering all of those small trials and tribulations, right? Whether it be to like film a podcast episode, to like do anything that's, like leading up to that thing, to do some sort of like large initiative at like work, or just any sort of like pursuit or like outcome, right? Like just know that, how you go about any of those things is how you do all of them, right? That like there are all these kinds of like principles. And I guess maybe I just realized I kind of like went a level under on that topic of just like kind of like how you do those things. But then again, I don't know, maybe I need to actually have a whole episode to like explore that whole topic. But like how you do anything is how you do everything. And I'll be honest, guys, I was trying to kind of keep this episode short, and I'm not even sure where we're at on the runtime right now, but I'm going to end that question right there, and we're going to move on to the last question of the episode. Why is like building skill the most honest path to longevity when difficulty isn't going anywhere? All right, let me just kind of contextualize this one a little bit. I don't know, I feel like these questions, I kind of wrote them in like a weird way. This question was supposed to actually be designed to kind of segue into a jiu-jitsu analogy, which, for those of you who've been watching the podcast, have been wanting to kind of touch more on that. And I think, I don't know, I just really want to do that for this episode, just because I've personally been wanting to kind of talk about that. But like, I think, I don't know, I'm going to kind of like freeform this one a little bit. So jiu-jitsu, which is a martial art, if you don't know like what it is, maybe just kind of like check it out like online. But like generally speaking, of like all of the like martial arts out there, it's regarded as the most complex, and to get a black belt in it, takes significantly like longer than any other sort of like martial art, just because it is such a complex thing, and there's so many options, and it's constantly evolving and all these things. So that's just kind of a summary of like the art, I guess. But the the reason why I wanted to bring this up is that, and like even as I'm talking about this right now, I'm like, I don't even know how to really bring this point home, but let's just say that this is a martial art that is very complex and it's very hard to navigate and to grow within. And the reason why I just want to talk about it is that like it's this good anecdotal kind of example of like when you put in the time and the effort, you start to see results. And so, God, I don't know. I feel like I'm trying to keep this point succinct, and maybe just in me trying to make it succinct, it's just making it more complicated. So let me just freeform this one. I've been training the art for like 2.5 years or so. Just a blue belt for anybody else who's a practice or a practitioner of the sport. Just a blue belt, and I know enough to know that I know like nothing at all. Which is such a cool part about the art too. I feel like maybe I could talk about that in a different episode. But my point in this whole thing is that like it's very complex, it's very hard, and the more that you train, the more that you understand the application of principles, you start to kind of like hold your own. So like when you start this art as a white belt, right, you're just blown away when you like roll, or train with a higher belt, where it's just like you can tell that it's effortless for them, and you're just kind of like astonished, where it's like, and they can even like, you're like, how can they even like predict my next move? Like they're already like 3 moves ahead of me. And that's how you feel when you're a white belt. And then as you start to kind of like progress, and you're starting to understand the fundamentals and the principles of like why certain moves work, and you're training with like higher belts and you're getting more reps, you're getting more practice in that. Then when you go back and then you train with a lower belt, you're almost surprising yourself, where you're just like, oh wow, like I feel like I can kind of like predict their moves, and I feel like I am in a position where I can kind of control where things are going, and you can basically feel like you're on the flip side of it, right? And I just think, I got to figure out some way to like bring this point into like a succinct thing. It's like, if we keep with the analogy, the jujitsu analogy, is that like you don't get to choose. Like when you go up against an opponent who's more experienced, you don't get to say like, hey, can we make this like easier? Or, can you, I don't know how to really articulate this. It's just like things don't just become easy because you want them to. You can't wish those things into existence. And I think by wanting things to be simple, thinking things can be simple even is wrong. I think there's just a hidden cost associated with it, where like that's just not how life works. And I think the reason why I wanted to bring up the jujitsu analogy is it's this comparison, right? It's this other occurrence in life where it's like, hey, we need to have like a willing acceptance that life is hard, that things are hard, that things are complex. And instead of wanting things to be simple, why not just have a willing acceptance that they're not, and then to figure out ways to overcome them? And as I'm saying all of that, And thanks for hanging with me when I was trying to like navigate through the analogy, but I think, we're getting to a good kind of succinct place of this episode or of this particular question. Maybe I just kind of actually lost it because I said all that, but my point is this. I think in this modern era, and I've talked about it on previous episodes, that like leadership or just being able to get people to understand that things are complex, that life is complex, that the only way through is skills. I think that's something that's missing in the zeitgeist today. I think a lot, and I'll have other episodes about this, but I think that like there's a propensity to kind of say that, right? Like I think, I don't know, this is almost like a meta comment, but like it took me so long, even in this question, to try to like paint the picture of like what does this actually like look like, where like people could like throw out like a soundbite like, life doesn't get easier, you just have to like you have to get the skills to do the thing, right? I guess I could very well have just like said that. And granted, I could have maybe said that in like a more like grandiose way, and I don't know, like maybe it would have gotten like clicks and sound bites or like whatever. But my point in saying all of this is I had to take the time to try to figure out some sort of like analogy to kind of paint the picture of like why that statement like holds like water or truth. And I think maybe for people that are working within, or who are just watching this episode, who are practitioners of jiu-jitsu, maybe that just like resonated with you in some sort of way. I hope so. But I just think like people just don't take the time to contextualize, kind of principles, and it kind of just cheapens the whole thing. And I don't know. I just feel like maybe I got to kind of bring this question home because I am starting to tangent into a sort of like separate episode of just, I think it's important to kind of like stray away from like sound bites and like clickbaity like things and just have more like longer form examples or conversations on it, or like on a given topic, like on a given principle. Like my whole point in what I've been saying is I wanted to paint the picture of a specific example of why it's more important to build skill sets when trying to navigate complexity, right? Like trying to stay in it for the long haul, right? Because you can't wish things to be simpler, because one, that's not possible, and two, by taking out the nuance of the situation, of the problem, it means you never will solve the problem. And then your wish will just be to continue to make it simple. And as I say that, my head just kind of like melted a little bit. It kind of exploded a little bit. I don't know. I think that's kind of interesting. Need to remember that one for another episode. But I think, guys, I'll be honest, I'm not sure what the runtime looks like on this episode, but I'm going to go ahead and just end that question right there. And we will move on to the closing segment of the episode. All right, guys, let's move on to the closing segment of the episode, which is where I make an attempt to basically take this stream of consciousness that you guys were just watching and try to put a bow on it. So let's look back at the quote-unquote spine of this episode. Longevity in a complex world comes from skill, not like motivation or insulation from struggle. Yeah, I mean, I hope that, a lot of the questions, or, the kind of like the wrestling responses I had to each of those questions kind of, I don't know, inspired some things in you guys. I'm just like looking at this thing like longevity in a complex world comes from skill, not like motivation or insulation from struggle, right? Like motivation only takes you so far. We've all heard that before. Like the discipline to, like that's what's going to kind of like persevere, but even that like wavers. So I hope that some of the stories that I told you guys about me just trying to do this episode, right? All these little things that I did to just maintain a discipline of sorts, so then I could get the motivation to hit record and sit down and do what I'm doing right now. I hope that resonated with some of you guys. I just realized, or insulation, longevity in a complex world comes from skill, not like motivation or insulation from struggle. Oh wait, yeah, okay, sorry. The insulation part is that desire, that common desire for things to be simpler or to be easy, right? And that can take like many forms. And I think I don't even really want to try to contextualize that right now. It's just, what I mean. Like you've seen it, like just the desire to make things simple, right? That's a means to, I don't know. To me, that's just a means to that's a means to insulate from struggle, not wholesale, but like you just know what I mean. Let me read that back again. Longevity in a complex world comes from skill, not like motivation or insulation from struggle. Yeah. Okay. Um, and let's just go back to the operative word of skill, right? I think we all just know it, right? Like we've all got these certain things that we do. Comes from skill. I mean, how do I even, man, I just feel like I'm having a really hard time trying. Maybe I'm just trying to sound profound. Maybe, I don't know, but like from skill, like again, like let's go back to like the quote of like how you do anything is how you do everything, right? Like embedded within that are skill sets, right? So like that's the only thing that matters, right? And I just think anything outside of that just cheapens whatever there is in life. And I just think, I don't know. I'm just looking back now at like some other parts of this episode, and I just want to kind of go back to the artistic part. Like it's just, why do we chase simplification instead of like building the emotional, cognitive, and physical capacity to handle complexity? What do soul-feeding films teach us about recovery and presence that work culture keeps ignoring? God, I don't know. It's just like let's just look at those things through like the lens of skill sets. The skill set to be able to connect with other human beings, to understand complex problems, whether they're technical, tangible, or like soft skill things, right? Like these are all skill sets, but to just wake up and say like, I wish I had the motivation to do a thing or the discipline to do this thing, or because it's like it's the new year, like like maintaining some sort of like resolution, or getting upset with yourself that you like broke a resolution. Like life's hard, things are complex, they will continue to be hard, the complexity will continue to increase, but all these little things that we do, and maybe that's the best way to put it, like all these things that we do, those are skill sets, and that's the means to producing the desired outcome, whatever it is that you want. But to wish something to be simpler, or to wish, I wish, the situation was simpler. I wish a group of people didn't like do a certain thing, or that they do a certain thing, or that a situation, like, those aren't really things that like you do. I mean, now I feel like I'm getting caught in semantics, but like, I don't know. It's just like, the jujitsu analogy that I just went through, like, that's like a physical like manifestation of overcoming in adversity, or like producing a skill set to handle harder and harder things. If we look at the example of like Good Will Hunting, like Matt Damon's character, like Will, you know, Sean, who is like Robin's character, he had to go through like multiple other like therapists before he got to Sean, and Sean was able to create a connection with him. That's a skill set, right? Let's just say like the problem that like Will, or like Matt Damon's character, was a highly complex problem to solve. Granted, it's a human being, it's a human condition, it's right, but it's still a complex problem. But like Sean, who is like Robin's character, finds ways to connect. So that's a way of like overcoming in adversity. And I think it's just all these things show up in different parts of life, and who's to say that you can't translate them to other things? And I think that's what we should strive for, is obtaining those skill sets, as opposed to just wishing things weren't or were. I don't know. I think that might be a good place to end this week's episode. I don't know. Felt kind of like hot air at the end, or maybe because this is a topic that I care so much about, I really want it to be profound for me, and maybe it's not even intended to be. Like, maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is an understanding of this as just a principle, and just coming back to it and trying to remember, I guess, kind of like looking at it as like a North like star of sorts. I don't know. I guess a part of me just thought like maybe it would be more profound, and maybe it's not supposed to be, and maybe it's just something we just have to continually. Maybe it's not supposed to be a profound thing because you have to regularly exercise that. You can't. It's not something that you get to just say once and it sticks. Like, I mean, hell, let's stick with the analogy for just a quick second. Like jujitsu, you don't just reach a certain point and then it's like, oh, I've learned everything, I'm good, and I'll just wake up and I'll automatically like know all these moves. Like, it's a perishable skill. Like, you have to continue to train. Let's look at the Good Will Hunting analogy, right? Like, Sean and Will don't get to just meet once, and Sean says something profound, and then Will's like, oh, cool, like all these traumas that I've experienced over my entire life are just gone, right? Like, that's not the point. So I think, I don't know, my point in this is like, maybe I'm having a discovery of myself right now, or a discovery of the topic for myself, where it's just like, yeah, this isn't supposed to be a profound thing. It's supposed to just be a principle that people just need to understand and to continue to come back to, is that skill sets are the only thing that matter. And I don't know, I think maybe why this topic means so much to me is because I still have a tendency to gravitate towards simple things. Like, I want things to be simpler, and I know that that's wrong. And it's because of that tension between me knowing like what is right and what's wrong is what propels me to do like the right thing, so to speak, which is to maintain those skill sets. And I don't know, I feel like I just got into like a crazy like philosophical like meta like thing. And I think I don't know. Let me touch on this because I just thought this was a funny thing today. Because so I was cleaning out the garage and was cleaning out like some books. And I'm looking through like books that are like leadership centric, right? And it's like, God, this book is like 300, 400 pages long. And there's books all over the place about the topic. And there has been, there are, and there will continue to be. And I think, I don't know, I just think it's kind of fascinating where it's like, I was thinking about before I was going to click record on this episode. I'm like, let's see if I can make this like a succinct thing. Like, let's try to make it like 20 or 25 minutes. And, as soon as I got into this specific topic, I was like, wow, I don't think I'm able to do that. And I'll be honest right now, I'm not even sure what the runtime is right now. I mean, I think this episode could be very close to being the longest episode that I've filmed so far. But my point in all of this is, I think that's by design. I think that might be the point. I think maybe this episode's a little bit like longer because I am tired and I'm not like thinking entirely clearly or straightly. But I don't know. I just think because there's all these books and they're very long and they've been written previously, they're currently like, it's just, I think it's just, that's the way it's supposed to be. And I think we're never going to solve this problem. That's maybe the best way to put it. I think, God, but like, that just sounds like a weird place to end this episode. Let's just walk this whole thing back, guys. I think for me, and I'd like to think for all of us, I guess, or for you who are watching this episode, like, I think we can all agree that skill sets is the only thing that matters. Instead of wishing for something to be different, have a willing acceptance for it to stay exactly as it is. And you as the individual find ways to conform to it, to roll with it, to be able to manage it, to be able to interact with it. I think that's the only thing that matters. Let's end it there, guys. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to tune into like this week's episode. For those of you who it's your first time like tuning in, thank you for hanging around for this far, because I'm pretty sure this episode's going to be maybe an hour long, but we'll see after I chop it up. And yeah, I don't know. I think the reason why like I'm thrashing around so much on this episode is like it's a topic that I really care about, and I know it sounds kind of like a cringe thing to say, but like I would really love to hear you guys' thoughts in the comments section, because I just think like, I don't know. I think it's something that is, I think it's just really important. I think it's a really important topic, and I think it's really interesting why it's so hard to communicate. It's so hard to regularly like remember and maintain, and whether it be in yourself or in like the people that like you lead or the people around you, just every context, right? Like your families and all that, right? Like just being a human in the world. I just think, how do we just encourage all of us to like build and maintain skill sets. Yeah, I feel like that's a good place to end. So, yeah, let's end it there, guys. Like, thank you for taking the time, and see you all like next week.